it might encourage our people to become more active in some of the ministries and opportunities that we already have in the Montgomery area.
Are there programs that are now going on in the Montgomery area that have been recommended that they be developed in the California area?
I noticed in the Alabama Baptist State paper that it mentioned kindergartens, Meals on Wheels, literacy programs. We have some type of ministry concerning those three areas already with the Montgomery Baptist Association, sponsoring work in the Baptist Center downtown and in the West Side Mission Center that we're doing. Plus, many of our churches have individual church kindergartens, deaf ministries, special education ministries that are being carried on by local churches in our city.
How long have these been in existence, and how much further do you hope to develop them?
We've been doing these in Montgomery for several years. I'm not sure exactly. I know that the Christian Social Ministries Director, Ms. Gladys Farmer, has been with us now for 6 years and has been a real leader in providing churches an opportunity in the ministry area. But some of the churches have been in kindergartens and deaf ministry, special education ministry for several years. Okay, our plans are to give churches opportunities to ministry and to minister to people in the name of Jesus Christ. The churches do it on a volunteer basis, our Southern Baptist churches here, and we're encouraged by the number of volunteers that come out, take training, and then serve somewhere here in our city.
Prisons Commissioner Larry Bennett said the top-level job changes mean promotions for some and demotions for others and will take effect July 24th. Bennett also said his department, still strapped with financial woes, could face another court order soon unless there's a solution to overcrowding prison conditions.
We are faced with a very real possibility before the first of the year and the end of this year to be ordered by the court to release prisoners from our custody unless we have some very specific construction plans that will ameliorate that problem and plans that can be done without any foot dragging and can be done with an expedition. And if we don't have that, I fully anticipate that that will happen. I don't think that people want it. I know as a department we don't want it, but we may be faced with that. That's why it is so imperative that the legislature, and we hope the people of the state will try to convince their legislature what needs to be done. And this special session coming up would be an ideal time to do it. I just hope it's not too late. That's my primary concern. Our research unit has done projections on inmate population through the year 1980, and if I recall correctly, I believe their projection is that we will have 7,913 prisoners at the end of the year 1980. At the present time, we have responsibility for somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,200. So we're talking about, if my arithmetic is correct, about an additional 1,700 prisoners at the end of 1980 that we don't have today. This is what we're faced with. And of course, it's not only us, but the people of the state of Alabama.
In announcing some 10 administrative level of reassignments of personnel, Bennett said the changes will aid in creating a more productive environment for each of those involved.
The changes that we're announcing today, as far as personnel within the Department of Corrections, is in accordance with the plans that we previously announced to realign staff members within the Board of Corrections. These changes will aid in creating a more productive environment for each of the people involved. There will be other changes as the need for them arises. Today's changes will become effective Monday, July 24th, 1978.
George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
It was Tuesday when Governor Wallace entered the facilities here at Jackson Hospital. Barring any complications, tomorrow he'll be back at the Perry Street Mansion after what officials describe as a hospital visit that was both medically and legislatively successful.
He's had quite a few visitors from the cabinet as well as his family who have been to see him, and he's done extensive work on the bills relating to the special session of the legislature coming up. And he has these about finished to where we could probably talk in detail about them first part of the week.
There have been some rumors of the governor's health situation being even worse than it is at this time, that he had more complications than were reported with his urinary condition. Could you comment on that?
There are always rumors anytime that someone of the governor's stature is in the hospital, but the rumors are all false, and it's been just what we've said it has been, and the people will see that, of course, with him getting out of the hospital tomorrow, which is what we said at the time he was admitted.
One of the rumors circulating is that Governor Wallace has been requiring the services of a kidney machine, but both state and medical officials have denied the existence of such a situation. From Jackson Hospital, Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
Well, for August it will be down $1.03 per 1,000 kilowatt hours, and certainly we're very pleased with this, but we have to take note that the reason that it is down is because the Farley nuclear plant has been operating almost at full capacity, and that nuclear fuel is much less than the other fuels that are used to generate electricity, other than hydro, of course.
In combination with an upcoming refund from Alabama Power Company, what kind of effect is that going to have on the late summer electric bills?
Well, I certainly hope that by September and October especially, that it will be felt on the power bill. Of course, you know, it's all based on usage, but to have a reduction in the fuel cost will certainly be significant and can be seen on the bills.
I understand that we have another refund coming from the Southern Natural Gas Company. Could you give us a status report on that?
Yes, you know, the Southern Natural Gas Company is the pipeline that makes distribution to Alabama Gas, and I have been notified from Washington that the FERC has approved the refund and that we should be receiving it somewhere in late September, early October. The share for Alabama will be $6 million. And this should range in refunds for gas company customers in the neighborhood of $5 to $15 for Alabama Gas. Now, what it will be for the other systems in the state that use a Southern Natural Pipeline, I'm not sure.
Vinoy Garrison is one of the few holdovers from last year's championship team. And while this year's squad has not come close to last year's in terms of consistency, Garrison himself has had his steadiest season in a professional baseball uniform. But it wasn't always like that for Garrison. He was a star in college for UCLA, but he had to learn a valuable lesson when he entered the professional ranks.
Realizing that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. You know, I think every athlete has to come back down to reality. A lot of times I tell a lot of young ball players that everybody in here was all world wherever they're from. You know, and when you come out of that environment, being the one that's always being interviewed all the time, or the ones that people always know about, and when you come into that environment, then you realize that, you know, hey, you got to start all over again. And once you realize that, say that, hey, I'm going to start learning all over again and give it my best crack, and it'll be much better for you.
If Garrison is not quite as good as he once thought, he's been more than adequate for the Rebels this season. His .313 batting average leads the team, and on a day-to-day basis, he's been the most consistent hitter on the Rebels team. But Garrison realizes he still has a few things to learn. However, he's confident of making the move to Major League Baseball someday. Until then, though, Vinoy Garrison says he'll continue to give all he's got while in a Rebel uniform. Dan O'Brien, WSFA TV Sports.
$300,000 of a $2 million appropriation by the state legislature has been spent to keep portions of the state capitol from falling down. For the past 6 months, visitors to the capitol have seen this complex in a condition of repair. Few have seen how it looks from up here looking down. Warner Floyd, executive director of the Alabama Historical Commission, which is overseeing the restoration, says although work on the Capitol dome has been the center of attention, there are still plans to do more in putting the 125-year-old structure in good repair.
When this part of the activity is completed, we'll have a $300,000 restoration of the dome, and that will include the capitals, the decorative elements around the dome, and the lantern, and the entire area down to the base of the roof.
What's involved in doing a restoration piece like this?
Well, the first thing that had to be done, we had to have architectural plans and specifications, which were drawn up by Nicholas Holmes of Mobile and Jim C. of Montgomery, under the direction of Malcolm McMillan and Milo Howard. And after that, then we had to get all of the old paint off. The 1850 portion of the Capitol had 50 coats of paint. The wings had approximately 30 coats. That had to be removed, and then we had to put the primer, and that was the red that you saw a few weeks ago.
What are the workmen actually doing right now to the dome?
They're working with turn metal, which is the same metal that's used on the dome. They're using the turn metal around the windows, and they're also doing general work around the edge and the base of the dome.
The figure of something like $300,000 you mentioned, is this just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak?
It's the first step, and we had to start with the dome, but the Capitol restoration could cost $7 or $8 million, even more if we rehabilitated a larger area of the Capitol. But if we built a new Capitol of the same mass and class, we'd be talking about $15 million. In addition to that, we have a tourist attraction. The Capitol is very appealing to visitors, and we have 150,000 visitors now. And when it's restored, that number will increase considerably.
Where do you hope to get all this money?
Well, there's only two sources. The Alabama legislature must be the main source. And we will also get federal money for it from the Department of Interior. The Alabama Historical Commission has already committed $100,000 federal dollars.
The Capitol building has served the state during 4/5 of its period of statehood. All Alabama constitutions except the first one were drawn up here. The clock and bell atop the portico were installed in 1852 as a gift from the city of Montgomery. In late August, workmen will come down from their perch atop the Capitol on the outside of the dome and move inside where more work remains to be done. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Prison authorities are calling it a minor incident. Draper Warden James Cook said only 2 inmates were involved, and the entire incident was over in about 30 minutes. Cook said the 2 inmates climbed to the top of the prison's water tower and simply sat down. A 3rd inmate reportedly climbed up and convinced the other 2 to come down. Warden Cook said one of the inmates had been put on disciplinary probation earlier this week, losing 2 months in good time. Cook said the other inmate was apparently upset because he had had no visitors recently. The warden said the inmates were charged with failure to obey a direct order. They were put on disciplinary probation, and the prison board will decide what action should be taken when they meet tomorrow. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, Draper Prison.
Thousands of gallons of hazardous material are transported by our railroads every year, and according to officials, that capacity is growing each day. In light of the danger posed by the increasing number of train derailments, the State Civil Defense Department and the Family Lines Railroad is jointly sponsoring seminars across the state to train emergency support personnel to recognize and respond to hazardous materials and ensure public safety if and when an accident occurs.
We decided this was exactly what we wanted, or the closest thing to what we had been thinking that we needed to do for our emergency response personnel, and that's the rescue squads, the law enforcement officers, the fire departments, the ambulance drivers, and this type, to respond and what to do to recognize hazardous material and what to do once they recognized it. Could they react to it? Did they have the proper equipment to do it? If they didn't, all we want them to do is to spread the word to everybody to stay out of the way. You know, this is our biggest problem, is crowd control, and people is curious as to what's going on. If we can get them back out of the way, then we hope that we can save lives. And we're getting more and more involved in trying to make all of the shippers responsible, feel the responsibility and exercise this responsibility to make sure that their vehicles are placarded, for instance, and labeled.
Railroad officials said they plan to help correct some of their past mistakes by bringing the railroad system up to government standards.
We are constantly upgrading our rail cars to make them safer. All of the large rail cars containing LP gas and things are being constructed better. We are putting shields on them and better safety devices.
When a train derailment happens, where does the basic responsibility lie?
The responsibility lies with the railroad, I feel. We like to bring in, of course, all emergency response personnel because we need these people to help us as far as evacuation. This is, of course, only when hazardous materials are involved. Our program now is to educate emergency response personnel and to help them in situations like this. In a lot of situations, there's not that much that can be done except to maintain public safety, and that's what we're all about.
Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Vice President Mondale spoke to the media next door to the banquet room his boss had used during a campaign trip to Alabama. As expected, Mondale spent most of the session talking about farming, and for a few minutes had to defend some recent administration moves, such as increased imports of foreign beef.
What we did was to take a very modest step, permitting 0.5% of beef to come in the utility beef field. Our predictions were that it would have little or no impact on the market. It was a very modest step. We did not remove import quotas as they did in 73 and 74. This was a very modest step. And in fact, after that decision was made, cattle prices remained firm. It was following reports by the Department of Agriculture that there was more standing beef being fed than was anticipated, which came out about a week later, that beef prices began to fall. I'm glad to say that recently the prices have been firming and now are back up to almost where they were, in some cases higher than they were before. In a speech I gave last week in Kansas, I made several commitments. Number one, we will never impose price controls of any sort on American agriculture. One of the reasons we went through these problems the last few years is they froze agricultural prices disastrously for some months, and it took some time to get over it. Secondly, we will never remove import quotas generally, as was done in the past. We believe that our cattle producers and other producers have to be assured of good income in order to bring forth the investment necessary to have the beef production and the other kind of productions that we need, and we are totally committed to that. And 2 days ago, we met with a broad cross-section of cattle producers from around the country, the President, myself, Secretary Berglund, to make that point clear. And I believe the cattle producers are feeling much better about it and are going to be moving forward with new investments to give us the beef production that we need.
Other subjects that popped up concerned Andrew Young's recent political prisoner statements, which the Vice President attempted to mellow, and the future of wheat trade with Russia, which Mondale supported. The Vice President's brief response to the media was polite, without any deep surges into controversial matters. After all, the primary purpose of Mondale's 2-hour visit was to laud the Alabama farmer, and apparently that he did very well. From Birmingham, Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
Well, I'm human, and I err, and I make mistakes, but I try my best to make up for what mistakes I make by hard work. I've been raised on hard work, and it doesn't bother me. I think that if one would call me anything, I'm an activist, I like to be involved in things. I think that's my job. I think that the criticism that I can imagine the criticism these same critics would have if I sat desk-bound at this desk and never went out. They'd say, look at him, he's like Richard Nixon. He sits in the White House all the time. They'd say that I sat here in City Hall. There's some people who would not be pleased with me no matter what I did. I try to be where problems are in the city, and I think that's what my job is. This morning, for example, at 5:30 this morning, I was checking a park site on Woodley Road, construction work there, construction work in other phases of the city, been to the sanitary department, been to the maintenance department, and roll call at the police department before I came to work. Now, that's just the way I tick.
Your Honor, you've heard the talk that you are a dictator.
Well, you know, there's some people who just despise my basic philosophy of hard work and trying to do things right, and if that displeases them, so be it. I'm going to do the very best job I can despite whatever criticism comes from that group who would not like anything I did, so I'm going to try to do the best I can and for the best job for all the citizens of Montgomery.
There are some police officers in the Montgomery Police Department who feel that you interfere with the operation of the police department.
Well, the chief doesn't. His deputy chiefs don't. They tell me I'm the first mayor that's ever paid enough attention to make sure that I know what equipment that they need, to know what the strain on the manpower that they have. I know the patrol districts. I know the type of equipment they have. I know all that because I make it my business to go and see. I know what kind of fire trucks we need. I know what kind of maintenance equipment we need. I know this because I'm down in the ditches with the maintenance men. I'm looking at the garbage trucks. I'm looking at the fire trucks. And I don't try to overmanage, but I certainly go and look and see for myself as to what is happening. And if some patrol officer or somebody thinks that I'm looking a little too closely, well then maybe they are taking too many coffee breaks and I'm seeing after it a little bit more.
Now there's some things that would be downright funny if they weren't so serious. There's a real attempt here at a flim-flam. First, anyone trying to identify with Senator Allen when they've got no right to do so personally or philosophically, and you don't have to take my word for it. And second, a candidate trying to posture himself as a conservative bent on trying to reduce the size of government when the opposite is much more accurate. I've heard about all I can take on fiscal responsibility and government spending from some quarters. The ultimate in fiscal irresponsibility is the judicial pension that was maneuvered for one individual. This special legislation, which cost about $3,000 to an unknown candidate in our race, will start paying him about $30,000 a year for the rest of his life just 2 years from now when he gets to be 60 years old. I think the voters of Alabama are going to want to keep him retired in Alabama so they can watch how he spends that money while we all try to figure out a way to afford his retirement.
Mayor Emery Farmer read General Gillum's letter of resignation to the City Council. In it, the General said he was leaving city service effective July 31st for personal reasons, saying he wanted to spend more time with his family. Gillum formerly served as commander of the Air University at Maxwell Air Force Base. He came to the city 17 months ago after former Public Safety Director Ed Wright left following the Bernard Whitehurst scandal. Mayor Farmer praised General Gillum's service since that time.
This man, Alvin Gillum, came to the city of Montgomery in a trying time. Jim Robinson, I placed a call to him one Saturday afternoon late and got him at the Bay Point Country Club and told him the city of Montgomery needed him. He never flinched. He said he would be there. And when he came, he said he would stay for 3 months. 17 months later and many accomplishments later, he has decided that it's time to go back and do those things that he had looked forward to in his retirement after 36 years and 3 wars in the service of this country.
The mayor then presented General Gillum with a certificate of merit for his service to the city. Farmer said a replacement for Gillum will not be sought. Rather, he said the Office of Public Safety will be abolished, and a new position of Special Assistant to the Mayor will be established to oversee the police and fire departments. Farmer said it was time more control of these departments was assumed by the mayor's office. In other council action, a resolution was passed forming an agreement between the city and the Federal Government Services Agency to work towards development of Union Station. The agreement is the first step in the city's plan to donate the historic landmark to the GSA. Bill Capes of the GSA's Public Building Service outlined the format to be taken. He said the entire approval process should take between 30 and 45 days, culminating with the approval of the Public Works Committee of Congress. If that approval is given, Capes says the funding for the restoration will then be requested. And if that is achieved, actual work on the building would take about a year or a year and a half. As a first step in the GSA's investigation into the plan, a crew of federal engineers, architects, and estimators will tour the station next Monday. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, City Council.
Small businesses are.
I'd like some, make sure this is...
Trying to set up an appointment with the HUD in Birmingham to take the motion that we passed in the bids as we adhere to the office staff and myself. And my reason, Mr. Miller's reason for being there was to answer any questions that the attorney...
Equipment reasons and for price, for the total price of the job. I don't believe, from what I've been able to find out, that you can take down Jackson Heights for $19,500. Now, the question in my mind is, suppose he cannot take it down for that. He's bonded for just the contract price, then who pays the difference? I think if, this is my concern, let me just put it simply that way. I mean, I have nothing against Mr. Bracy or anybody else. When I look at the difference in his bid for approximately $65,000 last year and a bid this year of $19,500, then I am concerned, you know, why the difference?
My client and I have discussed it, and my client's responded to me that he has no question that his bid is effective, that it is correct, and that it is accurate, that he will be able to provide the authority with a performance bond, that he has already provided the authority with a bid bond, and that he can perform the work for the price that he bid, and the work will be performed for the price that he bid.
The next step for the bids will be to go to Birmingham to be approved by HUD up there, and the controversy in the past has been the HUD requirements. Have you looked over the bids, and are you confident that Mr. Bracy's bid will pass the requirements?
I have not reviewed the bids, and I have not reviewed Mr. Bracy's specific bid, but Mr. Bracy and I have been in close contact with regard to the preparation of the bid and with regard to the compliance of Section 3, which are the HUD requirements. And it's my opinion that he has properly complied.